Hey, Karina.
Hi, Ruth.
So, agents, if you're here, you may have just seen our public Facebook Live. And now we're on YouTube talking to agents about lending. And I'm here with my favorite lender, Karina Bross from Guild Mortgage. We've been working together since shortly after I was licensed. I wish it was the minute I was licensed because I had a couple of rocky transactions. We were coming out of the crash back then, and lending was complicated and difficult. And gosh, I hear agents even who didn't go through that wishing for the market to crash. Like, prices need to come down. They're high. We get they're high, but you do not want to go through what everybody went through just so you can get a cheap house. It was hell. And I would say of everybody who called me then looking to buy a house, probably like maybe half of them ended up getting qualified. Wouldn't you say there were a lot of people who could not qualify?
Yeah, I'm like, it's hard to remember, but
Yeah.
it was crazy for a minute, with,
Yeah.
I remember a moment where it was like conventional didn't want under 20%
I was
and,
just going to say you had to put
yeah,
20% down.
yeah,
And so almost everything was FHA if they, weren't
yes,
maybe selling a house. Um, so we had tons and tons of FHA. And then, obviously if they were looking at townhouses or condos or something, then we had the FHA approvals or appraisals that we always had to be terrified of.
yeah,
Um, and so it was really tough. And of course, people themselves had been through a lot. So we had a lot of people who'd been foreclosed on, a lot of people who'd been bankrupted, and needed to wait until they could buy again. You and I went through that with several clients,
yes,
helped them rent, helped them, figure out what they needed to do, and then waiting for the moment when
mhm.
they could pull the trigger. Um, so there was an awful lot. It was not a happy time at all. It was really hard. Um, and as a realtor, we've all around the country been in a low inventory market for the last several years. And in some places that's shifting. I think just because prices are so high in those areas. Um, I'm not aware of anywhere that really has solved the supply and demand issue yet, um, with supply. But people don't. When people have that many choices, they don't buy anything. I mean, I used to show people 30 houses, and they'd be like, "Eh." Now they see one, and I'm like, "Okay, multiple offers, let's go."
Yeah, yeah. They're fewer and far between right now, for sure.
Hmm. So we were talking about interest rates.
Yes.
And I still find that a lot of agents don't understand a lot of things about interest rates. Do you run into that? I know you work with a lot of great agents, but
Yeah, well, there's just a lot of conflicting and confusing, news all the time. They certainly don't make it easy to
no.
understand. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it is complicated.
it is.
So
Yeah.
we were talking about how people have an idea that when the Fed meets and um, does something with the interest rate that they actually control, that is directly lowering or raising mortgages, and that's not true. So can you
Yeah.
explain it again a little?
Yes, there is a lot of confusion. Like if the feds meet and they lower the rate by 0.5%, everyone then is like, "Oh, the mortgage rates dropped by 0.5%." And you're like, "No, no, that was the Fed funds rate." So, definitely, it is a big factor that affects mortgage rates. They do react to the news on what the Fed's doing with interest rates, but mortgage interest rates don't price off of the federal funds rate. So just because that drops a 0.5% does not mean that the mortgage rates have. The last drop that we had in September, the market had kind of priced it in ahead of time. We dropped before the Fed meeting because everyone was really anticipating that drop. And then when the Feds met, we really didn't see any change at all. And we've actually had a little bit of an upwards move since. So we're actually probably the highest we've been in the last 3 months right now, just because of, better than expected economic data and just, stuff going on, the
Do
elections.
you know offhand, and I don't mean to throw a curveball
Mhm.
at you, but it just occurred to me. So I know that I heard quoted recently, I think it is 9 out of the last 10 presidential election years, home prices went up after the election. So I think the only time they didn't was during the crash, whatever year that election was. I don't remember. But do you know if there's any similar pattern to interest rates? Do they typically go up or typically go down?
I
Or
am
is it
not
Republican,
aware of
Democrat
like
thing?
the trend. That's an interesting question. I'll have to research that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I've heard anyone weigh in on that, but that would be an interesting thing to know. Because the interesting thing about the housing prices going up is it doesn't matter who won. So obviously during all of those elections, there's been Republicans and there's been Democrats, and
Mhm.
across the board, prices went up after an
Yes.
election. So so that's pretty interesting. The other thing we were talking about is still relating to interest rates, but what the interest rate is, there's not just one. So I'll have clients ask me, like, what are interest rates right now? I don't know. Talk to a lender, because there's different products. There's different, I don't, they're not really incentives, but you have programs sometimes that can help first time buyers or things like that. And then each person is going to qualify for their own interest rate based on their own financial circumstances.
Well, yes, they price off not only the loan program itself, but your credit score, your down payment, your loan amount, and in your income. Those are all factors into the interest rate. So, I looked it up yesterday, and it said the average 30-year fixed rate was like 6.57, I think it said. But that's like the average, right? Because could be higher, could be lower, depending on your scenario. And also when you're looking online, like there's a lot of lenders that are just automatically charging points, with that interest rate that you're seeing, versus a no points. And that's always something you just really want to look at your options and comparisons rather than just paying points right away. Because if you do refinance in the next year or so, it probably didn't make sense for you to pay points. You at least want to understand what you're paying in points to get that lower rate,
Yeah.
and how long of a recoup time that is.
So those are
Just so
questions
that
that
you're aware.
agents should tell their clients to ask their lender. Does this include points? What does that mean?
Mhm.
Break it all down, right? Because I
Yes.
know a lot of them are like, here's a rate. And
Yes.
it's not
And it
really.
can be deceiving. Yeah, I see a lot of that online is like they're touting this low interest rate, but when you look, it automatically has points. So you just kind of want to be looking at what your options are.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important as realtors to have a lender that we trust, that we know, who will, take care of our clients, and that they're going to get, I always say, I don't know if she's the lowest interest rate. I know that they have very good rates at her company, and they tend to be the lowest. But if there's a way that you can save a smidge, but you have to go with some online lender who's in California or New York behind a desk and not clocks out at 4 o'clock. Had that happen. it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter what your interest rate is if you don't get the house. Let's put it that way. So as agents, we all need to have a lender that we really trust to refer our clients to, and also who can answer our questions. So sometimes, I have a general question, or someone needs an explanation that I need some information from. And so I can always reach out to Karina and get that.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming on here and talking about all this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Is there anything I should say just before we go? I should ask, is there anything that you really wish agents knew?
I mean, just everyone's scenario is unique. So a lot of times, people are like, oh, you can do this, or they're quoting a rate, but it might be something that, they don't qualify for. So, it's always just good to get them in connection with a lender just to make sure that they understand the numbers and,
Yeah. And that I just said it on the phone with one of our mutual clients. That's a Karina question. So I think realtors should be comfortable passing on those questions to the expert. I am not the mortgage expert. I have one.
Yeah, and we love working with your team. So
thanks
for trusting us.
with you too. Yeah, well, you've earned it over and over again. So, if you're an agent somewhere and you think that it's okay that you're getting extensions filed for clear to close or even closing, find somebody who never ever does that. I've got that person.
I'm always surprised that the amount of times I hear like the lender, they're not answering the calls and the emails. I'm like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
communication is key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have never, like I said, you've never dropped a ball. So
thank you. We try.
I know you do. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.